Welcome, everyone. God, everybody got so quiet. We're going to start our afternoon session in a couple minutes. Liz, you'll give me a heads up. Oops, sorry.
Yeah, the numbers are not going up quite as quickly, so you could start with your intro now.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Anjac. My nickname is Deanie. I'm a project director here at Anjac. So welcome to day 3, session 5. And you can join us via, if you can tweet at this about the Anjac Congress on Twitter and with the hashtag EnviroCongress. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. It's a gorgeous fall day. I'd just like to say that all our attendees are muted and not on video, so go ahead and enjoy your lunch. I certainly will be enjoying mine right after this, but if you have questions, type them into your Q&A at the bottom of your screen. We will be monitoring and sharing these questions out loud. If you're having any technical difficulties, please contact our Deputy Director, Liz Ritter, and there's a phone, her number there. And these sessions are being recorded and will be posted at a later time to our YouTube channel. With extreme gratitude for our gold, silver, and bronze sponsors. We are so grateful because they're helping us bring this event to you today. So thank you so much to our event sponsors. And a big shout out to our business sponsors and our foundation support as well. These folks support local environment and the work that we do all year round. And of course, a big thank you to our colleagues at these amazing organizations. We are so grateful for all the support you give us. And if you can, we're just going to ask that you please consider making a donation to Anjac. Your donations do make a difference. We do not receive any state funding. We receive funding through grants and just through donations. So all the donations will definitely help support the work that we provide for you folks. And we are a very small but mighty group, and we work statewide. Okay. And I am so pleased to welcome Jake Sneeden. He is the Manager of External Affairs at Atlantic City Electric and one of our sponsors today. So Jake, I am going to share your presentation. Give me 1 second while I switch over.
Perfect. Thank you, Deanie, and good afternoon, everyone. As Deanie mentioned, I'm Jake Sneeden. I'm with Atlantic City Electric, and I'm really thrilled to have the opportunity today to kick off this workshop session for tools and actions for climate change in New Jersey. Climate change and its social and environmental effects are among the most significant challenges facing the world today. And at Atlantic City Electric, we are regularly seeing the devastating effects of more extreme weather on our energy grid, from Isaias last year to the EF3 tornado in Gloucester County last month. And this just shows us how imperative it is to advance clean energy solutions as fast as possible across the areas we serve, and to build a more resilient system to withstand the severity of these new storms. So to start off today's session, I just wanted to provide a high-level overview of Atlantic City Electric's climate commitment to help our communities and the state of New Jersey achieve their climate and clean energy goals. So on the screen, Deanie's shared a high level, our climate and clean energy strategy, which focuses on 3 areas: company, customers, and community. And the real headline here is that we have a goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions associated with our New Jersey operations by approximately 50% by 2030, achieve net zero by 2050, and maintain an ongoing focus on building a more resilient future. And I'll just dive briefly into an overview of each area to give you a sense of where we're focused on. So Deanie, next slide, please. Some of the highlights from our company initiatives are completing energy audits to identify additional energy savings opportunities, transitioning to renewable energy use in our buildings, reducing overall electricity use in our buildings, and electrifying our fleet of vehicles. Next slide, please. For our commitment to our customers, our energy efficiency programs, which are rolling out as we speak, will help residential and business customers save energy and money. We've got EV programs and services that are starting to become available at the end of this year. Those are going to offer rebates and other incentives to support the build out of more than 3,000 charging ports for residences, public spaces, fleets, and workplaces across our service area. And we also have an ongoing effort to simplify the switch to solar by improving the interconnection process. And finally, on my last slide here, talking about community, we really seek out important partnerships to help address climate change in a variety of ways. We've got the Sustainable Community Grants Program, which awards $75,000 annually in grants to communities to preserve open space and build resilience. We're growing the local clean energy workforce by expanding energy efficiency curriculum associated with our workforce development programs. They're also now including greenhouse gas education and training in clean energy technology like solar. And finally, we're engaging and educating students on climate change through the New Jersey Student Climate Challenge program with Sustainable Jersey and the Drum Thwacket Foundation. So these are just the high level things. We've got a lot going on as it relates to our climate commitment. If you're interested in learning more, you can go to atlanticcityelectric.com/climate. If you have any questions for me or want to learn more about any of our programs, also feel free to reach out to me and I can have a member of my team come to speak to your commission or whatever's most helpful. So thank you so much for the time, Deanie. I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Jake. I really appreciate that. Yeah, a lot of initiatives going on. That's super exciting. Talking about grants is always great because I know funding is a challenge for our municipalities and environmental commission. So knowing that this is an option is wonderful. Thanks, Jake. All right, I'm going to stop the share and go back to the other presentation. All right. Okay. Oh, sorry, folks. My presentations are not showing the way I want them to. Let's see if I can get that. Okay, so this should work. I am incredibly excited to introduce our moderator for today's session. It's Ed DeFilia. So Ed is not only an Anjac trustee, he is chair of the Ocean Township Environmental Commission, plus sits on the planning board. So he knows a lot about this topic, which is great. And just excited. And in his day job, because that's not enough, he's also, he works for the New Jersey Educational Facility Authority in his day job. So welcome, Ed. Thank you so much for moderating the session.
Great, thank you, Deanie. I have the pleasure, a lot of folks on this panel today are very accomplished, and I have the pleasure of introducing all of them to you now. So bear with me so you can hear the wonderful bios of our 4 speakers for today's session. And we will start with Jean Herb, who is the Executive Director of the Environmental Analysis and Communications Group, a center of service, research, and practice at the Rutgers University Blaustein School of Planning and Public Policy, where she leads initiatives at the intersection of social and environmental determinants of health, health equity, environmental sustainability, state and local public policy, and inclusive participatory decision-making. Jean co-directs the state's Climate Change Resource Center and co-facilitates the New Jersey Climate Change Alliance. Prior to joining Rutgers in 2010, Jean spent more than 2 decades at the State Department of Environmental Protection, most recently as Assistant Commissioner of Policy, Planning, and Science. She's an alumnus of Rutgers and New York universities. Lucas Markson is the Associate Director of the Office of Research and Analytics at Rutgers University, where he provides leadership and direction on the development of analytical capabilities and services to meet the ongoing demand of stakeholders both within and outside the university. Lucas has expertise in developing geographic information systems, enabling spatial analysis and modeling for research initiatives in a variety of disciplines. Lucas earned a master's in city and regional planning from the Blaustein School, a Master of Science in Computer Science from Rutgers University, and is currently pursuing a PhD in planning and public policy. Gary Sundermeyer is Vice President of Operations for the Bayshore family of companies. Bayshore is one of New Jersey's largest recyclers, managing 9 separate recycling facilities on its 58-acre campus. Gary assists in the management of facility-wide operations toward the corporate vision of running 100% green businesses powered 100% by renewable energy. Gary joined Bayshore following 30 years of service at the NJDEP. He serves as the agency's chief of staff for 10 years. He also serves as vice chair of Sustainable Jersey, co-chair of the New Jersey Climate Change Alliance, co-chair of the New Jersey Transportation Planning Authority's Resilient Task Force, and helps lead the legislative committee of the Association of New Jersey Recyclers. Gary has an undergraduate and master's degree in environmental planning from Rutgers University. And last, but absolutely not least, and dialing in all the way from the other side of the Atlantic Ocean in Ireland, is Karolina Ramos, who is the Sustainability Program Manager at the Jersey City Office of Sustainability, where she coordinates and oversees the implementation of various internal and external sustainability initiatives. Raised by Latin American parents in Hudson County, her passion for climate action stems from both historical and present-day environmental and climate justice issues that low-income minority communities face. Prior to her current position, Karolina served as an AmeriCorps Vista in Jersey City, working with community-based organizations. She graduated from the School of Environmental and Biological Sciences at Rutgers University, where she majored in environmental studies. And without further ado, I turn it back over to Deanie and to Jean to start our presentations.
Thanks, Ed. I'm going to stop share, and Jean, you are welcome to share your screen.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Deanie. So hang on one second. My screen is paused. Stop share. Let me pull this up in slideshow mode. Okay, moving slow. Okay, so can you see my screen? No.
Not yet.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So I'm Jean Herb. Thanks for the introduction. I'm at the Rutgers Blaustein School, and I work very closely with colleagues, including Lucas Markson, who will also be chatting here today. And really what we're trying to accomplish in our conversation is to introduce you to some resources that we have available to help you with your local planning for climate impacts. So today we're both focusing on the preparedness, adaptation part of climate work, rather than looking at emissions reductions, just because that's as much time as we have. Before I get started, I want to give a shout out to my colleagues in the Frenchtown, New Jersey Environmental Commission, which I'm proud to be a member of. So, hey, everybody from Frenchtown. So we know more than we need to know in terms of being able to advance climate action here in New Jersey. Our focus is on looking at increasing temperature, looking at changes in precipitation, and also looking at sea level rise. So I know that
Jean, I'm so sorry. We still can't see your screen. We're getting a message that says you started screen sharing, but it's not. Yeah, we can't see anything. It's a blank screen.
That's weird. Okay,
Yeah,
I'm seeing it and it's saying it's sharing. Let me do it again.
Okay, yeah.
Zoom was playing trick or treats this week, and it seems to be tricks than treats.
How about now? My screen is saying you're screen sharing.
No, it's just a black screen. Deanie, do you have Jean's presentation?
I do. Let me pull it up.
Thanks. That's strange.
Yep, this is why we have Plan B.
Thanks, Deanie.
Yeah, no worries.
Sorry about that, Jean.
Oh, no worries.
I just need a minute to pull it up.
That's totally fine. I'll just keep talking.
Okay.
So I know that people can be really intimidated when they think about the complexities of climate impacts in terms of how to act, whether it's in your community, on your environmental commission, or in your own home. And so what I always try to encourage people to do is to just think about those three boxes that I thought I was showing to you, which is thinking about climate impacts in New Jersey, focusing on changes in temperature, increases in temperature, changes, oh, thank you. You can just go to the next slide. Changes in precipitation and increases in sea level rise. And so with regard to temperature, we know that here in New Jersey, that warming is twice the global average. And the expectation is that we will see, or we are seeing, more warm extremes and less cooling, which is especially important for some agricultural products in terms of having cooling in evenings. And we're also expecting to see, as a result of those changes in temperatures, an intensity of coastal storms, not necessarily more coastal storms, but for the storms that we have, they become more intense. In terms of precipitation, we can see that over the past 100 years, the trends do show severe increases in precipitation. And the expectation is that we will see more torrential storms, not necessarily more frequent storms, but that the storms that we have will be more torrential, interspersed with a greater frequency of dry spells. And so what that translates into in terms of more torrential storms is more flooding. And then in terms of sea level rise, we know that here in the mid-Atlantic, sea level is rising faster than the global average as a result of geologic formations, and we've seen a rise of about 1.5 feet since over the course of this century or so, and that the projections for sea level rise in New Jersey have been fairly well documented. One of the things that's important to appreciate is that what the science community tells us, including the scientists we've convened here in New Jersey, is that our futures, our climate futures after 2050 depend on the emissions portfolio that we have. So what that means is that between now and 2050, the trajectory we're on, our projections are very certain. After 2050, our projections in terms of temperature, precipitation, and sea level rise will be different depending on how much we, as a global community, reduce our emissions. And for that reason, I always tell people that acting on climate change is not an either or. It's not about only reducing emissions or only preparing. It's definitely both. Okay, next slide. So I want to just give you a quick point of reference in terms of policy making here in New Jersey. And again, this is focused on climate adaptation and resilience. So I'm focusing on 4 areas that have relevance, I think, for local action. So the first is Governor Murphy's Executive Order 89, which appoints a Chief Resilience Officer here in New Jersey and an interagency council. And it directs the development of guidance for local agencies, for local governments, for communities to be able to develop climate action plans. And it also requires the State Planning Commission to incorporate consideration of climate hazards into its plan endorsement process. So that's number 1. Number 2 is Governor Murphy's Executive Order 89, which requires the integration of climate change impacts into environmental permitting. And you may have heard DEP talk about their anticipated PACT rules that are expected to be proposed in the new calendar year. And so the concept here is looking at how, when permitting is advanced and projects are approved, that they consider climate impacts. And so keep an eye out for that that kind of permitting, because it may also include permitting associated with local government activities. The third is a law that was just passed this year by our state legislature, which amends the municipal land use law. And what it does is it requires that any land use element as part of your master plan needs to include a consideration of natural hazards. And it also has to include a build out analysis. So what that means is that when your municipality is proceeding to update its master plan or do a re-examination of its master plan, it needs to, as part of that land use element, consider natural hazards. And then finally, under the requirements for the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, every county needs to complete a hazard mitigation plan. And each hazard mitigation plan includes what's called a municipal annex. And that municipal annex identifies specific strategies that the municipality wants to undertake to reduce its vulnerability to natural hazards. Unless the county has adopted an approved hazard mitigation plan, there are certain types of FEMA non-emergency funds that you're not eligible for. So it's critical to have those plans in place. So this gives you some sense of sort of the work that you're involved in at your environmental commissions and in your municipality, in order to give you a framework for where your actions can inform authoritative decision making. Okay, next slide. So if you leave here with anything, I guess, from my talk, know that there are tremendous amounts of resources here in New Jersey for you to be able to use as part of your local work in your environmental commissions to address climate change. So these are just a couple of things that the state of New Jersey, the Department of Environmental Protection has issued. On the left is its scientific report on climate change. On the right is its statewide resilience strategy that was just adopted this month. And then down on the bottom is a toolkit, which it provides lots of different resources and points you to resources that you can use to support your resilience efforts at the local level. Okay, next slide. This is a training that we worked very closely with the state and NOAA to develop. The concept here is to look to find strategies to integrate and involve populations that are not typically involved in civic processes, but who are the populations that are most affected by climate change, into local climate resilience planning. And so it's called a seat at the table, because the idea is that we're trying to bring more people to the table as part of community climate resilience planning. And so it takes you about an hour and a half to go through it. But essentially what it does is it gives you ideas for how you can better integrate vulnerable populations, underrepresented populations, marginalized populations into your climate planning work. Okay, next slide. Okay, so I'm here wearing two hats. The first hat that I'm wearing is as the co-director of the Climate Change Resource Center. And this is a center that was established by a law passed in 2020 by the state legislature, with the idea being that the academic community has an important contribution to make to address climate change here in New Jersey. And so we work with lots of other academic institutions. We work with partners like Anjac. We work with other NGOs and local governments. So some of the things, and I put the link to our website there, some of the things that we offer to you in terms of resources is lots of science. So please don't feel like you need to go anywhere else in terms of science. Lots and lots of resources that you can use in terms of your own work at the local level. And we also do a lot of analysis to understand what kinds of impacts climate change is having here in New Jersey. So for example, we're just finishing up some analysis looking at healthcare facilities and hospitals and impacts, and historic districts and historic sites in New Jersey, and other things like that. Finally, we've established what we're calling the Climate Resilience Corps, the Climate Corps, which is a group of graduate students with very strong expertise who are providing support to communities in terms of assessing vulnerability, particularly to flooding. Okay, next slide. My second hat is as the co-facilitator of the New Jersey Climate Change Alliance, and I'm pleased that Gary Sondermeyer is here, who is the co-chair of the alliance, and this is an alliance that Anjac is actually a participant in as well. We formed the alliance 12 years ago, with the idea being that we wanted to bring together diverse organizations in New Jersey who all shared the same concern about climate impacts and who wanted to work together to be able to advance science-informed climate action. So the alliance includes organizations like Anjac, it includes environmental organizations, but it also includes businesses. It includes a lot of public health professionals. It includes folks from utilities. It includes folks who work on social justice and environmental justice. So it's a really diverse group that comes together to work on efforts that are to provide collective impact. Okay, next slide. So the take-home message here today is that between these two hats that I wear, the Climate Change Resource Center and the New Jersey Climate Change Alliance, we offer a lot of resources for you. So there's lots of very short videos. If you're hosting a meeting in your community and you want to just show a video to educate people about different aspects of climate change, we've got it. We've got educational materials you can download and use, lots of background on science and impacts. Our climate course providing technical assistance to communities. And then we also do trainings, which and in 1 minute, I'm going to hand this over to my colleague, Lucas Markson, who's going to walk you through some of our data tools. And we'll be having a training on those data tools, much more in depth than what Lucas can provide here. And then we also have what we call the Climate Academy, which is where we have webinar-based presentations on critical topics regarding climate change in New Jersey, whether that's about equity in climate or harmful algal blooms or impacts to historic resources. And so with that, what we're really going to do now is to focus on the data visualization and mapping tools, and Lucas is going to walk you through them. Again, I encourage you to come to the Climate Change Resource Center's website and sign up to be on our email list, because when we offer those kinds of trainings, which pretty much all the time are free, you'll get an email so you know that that it's become available. Next slide. So again, just some links. Sign up, give us your email so you can get our emails, which will include not just information about trainings, but it'll let you know about other goings on in terms of climate impacts and climate action here in New Jersey. So last slide. Thank you, everyone. And now I am so pleased to turn it over to my colleague, Lucas Markson, who is going to walk you through our data tools.
Thanks, Jean. I'm just going to do a stop share, Lucas.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Pull up mine. Can everyone see that okay?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
Great. All right. Thank you, Jean. Good afternoon, everyone. So as Jean said, I'm going to basically give you guys a walkthrough of two of our partner tools, our Municipal Snapshots and our New Jersey Flood Mapper tool today. Just give you a little bit of background. So as was introduced earlier, I'm part of the New Jersey Agricultural Experiment Station's Office of Research Analytics. Our office provides all kinds of advanced statistical, spatial, economic, and technological tools to help projects and programs throughout the experiment station as well as the broader university. We do specialize in developing data informatics systems and data-driven online applications. And we have staff members that have expertise in GIS, interactive web mapping, as well as data visualization technology. We collaborate with a whole bunch of different types of stakeholders and experts to help develop these tools to meet different research, extension, and education missions of the experiment station itself. So, as Jean said, part of the Climate Change Resource Center, we have our NJ Adapt program. The NJ Adapt really represents a suite of online tools that's designed to provide data to planners, decision makers, and practitioners, and others addressing climate change in New Jersey. Right now, the NJ Adapt platform consists of three major tools: our NJ Flood Mapper, our Municipal Snapshots, as well as an NJ Forest Adapt tool, which focuses on climate change impacts on forestry resources in New Jersey. We do have some new tools that are currently under development. They're focusing on the aspects of climate change affecting public health, as well as agriculture and potentially other sectors as well. Just to give a shout out, so this is our very diverse Rutgers NJDAP team. We have faculty and staff members from across the university, from all different departments and centers and groups within here. And it's without them, none of this would be possible that we're showing you today. So I just wanted to give thanks to everyone there. And so just give you a little bit of background. So the two tools I'm going to be talking about today, they really are partner tools. They work kind of hand in hand with each other. The first is NJ Flood Mapper. This is an interactive mapping website that really helps you visualize exposure from different types of coastal flooding hazards. It has different kinds of enhanced map overlay capabilities that allow you to look at those flooding hazards in overlaid with different types of resources and different types of data layers associated with different types of aspects of your community. One of the things that our tool does provide is a total water level approach for exposure from sea level rise and storms. I'll show you guys this in person. This is actually a tool that lets you look at what the potential impacts would be of if 50 years from now we have a certain level of sea level rise, but what happens when we actually have 100-year storm events on top of that sea level rise? What can the flood exposure look like? And this application was funded by the National Estuarine Research Reserve System Science Collaborative through their Catalyst grant program. The other one, which I'm actually going to start with next, is our Municipal Snapshot tool. This is a nice, easy to use tool that provides you with access to reports on different types of coastal flooding risk against various municipal level resources. And this is, as you'll see, is integrated into NJ Flood Mapper, so they kind of work together. So I'm going to jump real quickly to do some live demos to help show you guys how these tools actually work. So in the slide deck, I have links to all these, and we'll provide them afterwards to you guys. But our Municipal Snapshots tool can be directly accessed from climatesnapshots.rutgers.edu. It has a straightforward interface. You actually can select your municipality from drop-down menus. So you can select your county first, and then it'll update the municipalities with the municipality within that county. So we'll use Atlantic City today for example purposes. Once you selected your municipality, we have 5 different reports you can run looking at the impacts of flooding on different types of infrastructure or resources within your locality. So we have a built infrastructure report, which looks at the impact of built infrastructure, such as wastewater treatment, energy generation, and transportation. We have a critical assets report that looks at the potential flood exposure of critical facilities, such as education, care, and public safety. We also have a natural and working lands report, which looks at the potential flood exposure of natural and working lands, as well as the sea level rise impacts on coastal marshes and access to public water access points. We also have a public health report, which tries to look at the projected impacts of heat increases and the potential flood exposure of health-related sites in New Jersey, such as hospitals and nursing homes and potentially contaminated sites. And then we also have a vulnerable populations report, which looks at the potential flood exposure to using different demographic data that includes things like socioeconomic status, housing, household composition, disability, minority status, language, and vehicle access. So you can click on any one of the reports here, and basically gives you a nice little formatted report. You can download these reports as a PDF, so you can save them locally on your computer if you want. Gives you an introduction about the flooding impacts specifically to that area. And then it gives you some data that's specifically to your municipality. So in this case, for critical assets, it's showing us for the different types of critical assets in Atlantic City, the number that could potentially be exposed due to 2 feet of flood inundation and 7 feet of flood inundation. We also provided it within a little graphical display here for visualization purposes. All the graphical displays, there's little menu buttons here. You can actually download these graphics as image files, so you can embed them into reports or presentations. You can also download the underlying data for them. As you'll see here, we provided both at the looking at data impacted by both sea level rise, as well as impacted by our FEMA flood zone data. So for municipalities that are inland or not along the coast, you'll receive information based on the assets that might be exposed based on the FEMA flood zone area for 100-year and 500-year flood events. So you can see that here as well. And the same thing provides you a graphical display of that data. And then we also have embedded maps, which actually show you the location of those facilities within the FEMA flood zones and within the 2 feet and 7 feet of sea level rise. There's a legend beneath them. And we also provide an appendix that gives some explanation about total water levels and sea level rise for those who aren't familiar with them, and links to all the data sources that are used to generate the reports. One of the nice features in the Municipal Snapshot is you'll see there are a bunch of buttons here that say link to live map. If you click any one of these, what will happen is it'll actually automatically open up the New Jersey Flood Mapper application with all the data layers that were incorporated into that report, preloaded onto the map for you and already zoomed in for your municipality. So you can actually start working with the data that was used in that report if you want to look in a little closer at things. So you can like zoom in and see, look at specific facilities that may be impacted. You can click on specific facilities to get more information about them, and so on. So just to show you some of the other reports we have. So our public health report, this one specifically looks at some projected climate data dealing with heat New Jersey for your municipality. So it's pulling in data from our partners at the Northeast Regional Climate Center, provides information about the days above 95 degrees Fahrenheit, both for the current baseline as well as projected out under 2 different emission scenarios. So a moderate emission scenario and a high emission scenario, and gives you kind of the change from the baseline that is projected to occur. Changes in cooling degree days, which is a measurement of how much energy is required to basically keep residences cool during certain types of high heat days, and also information on the maximum temperatures. In addition, we show flood exposure potentially to specific healthcare facilities and sites that may have health impacts, such as contaminated sites and Superfund sites. Both at the, and then there's also a link here to the other report, which I'll show, the vulnerable populations report. So this one is actually using data that, so some of you may be familiar, the Centers for Disease Control actually provide what they call their SVIs, or Social Vulnerability Index. And so what we're doing in this report is actually pulling out all the individual census demographic variables that used to create those indexes, and basically providing a modeling to show what the potential impacts of those populations would be within your municipality at exposures of both 2 feet and 7 feet of sea level rise, or for within the FEMA flood zones as well. So you can see here we have it broken out by, you're looking at things such as poverty and unemployment, stuff. We have data on different types of household composition and disability, so age 65 and over, civilians with a disability, and it shows you the percent of the population that's potentially that group represents, and then the potential number of those people exposed under those different flooding conditions. So I only have a few minutes left, so I want to jump over to New Jersey Flood Mapper. Oh, hold on, let's move this out of the way. There we go. So New Jersey Flood Mapper is an interactive mapping website that allows you guys to really kind of dive into the data much more deeply and look at different types of impacts within your locality. Just to give you a quick overview of the tool. So on the left here are your basic controls for the web map. We have, well, I explained before, our total water levels tool. This is a tool that basically provides you a little walkthrough, explains what the concept of total water level is. So showing the current high tide, the impact of sea level rise, and the impact of a flood event on top of that sea level rise. There's a little video that kind of helps walk you through it. And then you can go through the tool. It basically helps you with selecting the closest location to the area you're interested in, picking a specific type of emission scenario. So whether or not you think we're going to have lower, moderate, or higher emissions going forward past that 2050 date. And then based on your selections, you also can select your planning horizon. So what time period you're interested in looking at the potential impacts for. So we can go out to anywhere out to 2150. So we can choose 2090 for this purpose. And based on your selections, it actually provides you with a sea level rise estimate based on the location, the emission scenario, and the planning horizon. And it gives you the percent chances of those different sea level rise estimates of occurring. And so depending on the different type of planning purpose you may be using, you may want to look at something that even has a very remote chance of occurring versus or something lower than that chance. So for this purpose, we can pick a 17% chance of exceeding. And then the final step, it basically asks you, okay, well, what kind of flood event are you interested in looking at on top of that sea level rise? We provide a slider here with some of the standard flooding events, so an annual flood, a 2-year flood, a 10-year flood, and a 100-year flood. But we also have incorporated historical flood events. So if you're interested to say, okay, I want to see what a Hurricane Sandy event would look like on top of sea level rise in that time period, you can select that. You'll see it actually puts in the height for that specific tide gauge location you select in the first step. And then it gives you a summary. Basically, here's all your selections. Here's your estimated total water level estimate. So based on everything we chose, we could expect 8.6 feet of flooding inundation. And what the tool does, it rounds it to the closest foot increment that we actually have mapping data for. And you can actually click add to map, and you'll see that data automatically added to your map. So you can see what that 9 feet of total water level inundation would look like. In addition to that, like I said, we have flood hazard data here. We have, you can add any of the total water levels independently. We also have sea level rise data from 0 to 10 feet that you can add. We also have the Sandy surge extent data from Hurricane Sandy. We have hurricane inundation modeling for categories 1 through 4 hurricanes, and we have the FEMA flood zones. And then under map layers is where all the different types of resource data you can map are. So we have, your typical, county municipal boundaries you can add. We have the infrastructure, which is used in the one municipal snapshot. We also have the critical facilities. So you can add, say, like hospitals to your map and have them appear, so you can see here. We also have data on transportation, bridge, rail lines, gas stations, environmental hazards, Martian open space. You can add some of the social vulnerability data mapped at the census tract level. We also have some data on repetitive property loss at the municipal level and land use land cover. One of the things you'll see here is our layer control. The layer control actually allows you to add multiple layers to the map, and then you can actually change the ordering of the layers. You can turn specific layers on and off, and you can change the transparency of those layers as well. So if you have multiple layers on top of each other, you can change transparency. You can see them more clearly with each other. We also have what's called a new data set called from New Jersey MyCoast. This is a separate website that collects crowdsourced data on flooding events. We've integrated with that, so you can actually add those locations onto your map, and you can pull them up, and it provides, you know, a specific high water level report or a flooding event report, and with an image and a link that will take you to the more detailed information on the MyCoast website. You can access the municipal snapshots directly from here with an NJ Flood Mapper, selecting your locations. You can also change the base maps on the map. We also have the ability to save, share, and print your maps. So as you're creating a map, you can actually, if you want to be able to take this tool and share with another colleague of yours, or with another person who may be interested in seeing what you're working on, if you hit the save share, you'll actually create a permanent link that you can provide with someone. Then when they open that link up in their browser, it'll actually automatically add the map with all the data layers you had on, with the transparencies, the ordering, everything that you had that you were viewing when you were using the application will appear to that person when they use that link. You can also pull up a map image you can use to embed into reports. And we also have a minimal view, which is usually very nice for taking like a screenshot and embedding into some kind of either report or presentation or something like that as well. The last thing I want to show, because I'm running out of time, is our custom layers tool. This is something we just added recently to the NJ Flood Mapper. This actually allows you to bring in data from outside data sources that may not already be available in NJ Flood Mapper. This allows you to bring in data from any type of existing map services that's publicly accessible. So for an example here, I can actually go to the New Jersey Geographic Information Network's open data portal, and I can find a specific data set I'm interested in. So say immediate environmental concern sites in New Jersey. Most of them of these the objects here on the open data portal, you'll see there's what they call their view API resources, and there's a geo service. You can simply copy that link and then come back to the tool and paste it in. You can do a check on the URL. It checks to make sure it can read the data properly. It gives you the layer name, the type, and then you can add it to your map. Let me turn these other ones off so you can see them. And you'll see it automatically adds that data to the map. It's interactive. You can pull these items up and query them to see what's there. They appear in the legend as well. And so this is a great way to pull in other data that you may be interested in doing some kind of analysis on to look at the impacts with flooding events, things like that. Another potential one, this is one from the USDA from the Forest Service about dry days. And so similarly, you can click on the specific layer, which brings you to like a typical GIS map service. And you can actually just right click and copy the link and come back to Flood Mapper. Same thing, paste it in, check the URL, make sure it attaches properly, and add it in. Sometimes it takes a second or two to load if it's coming from an external map service, but then you can actually see, so this is the change in dry days based on a 90th percentile. It's a little slow to load, but there you go. And so, like I said, this is a really great kind of option. It allows you to bring in, any kind of data set you have access to on different types of GIS map services. Since I'm over time, I will stop right there, and I'll be happy to answer questions either at right now, Dean, if we have time, or at the end of the presentation.
Hey, Lucas, this is Ed. We actually got two, I'm hoping, short answer questions for you that maybe you can help answer. The first is from the chat. How current is the info on NJ Adapt?
So most of the data sources we are pulling from their authoritative mapping service sources. So if it's data that's provided by the state of New Jersey, we're pulling it directly from the OpenGIS portal. So it's, as that data is updated in real time, it's automatically updated on the flood mapping portal as well. There are some certain data sets, some of the flooding data sets that we're pulling, like FEMA flood zones, things like that, that we are housing internally here at Rutgers. And we go through a regular update process to make sure that we're trying to pull the most up-to-date data for those data sources as much as we can. So.
Great, thank you. And then the other question comes from Rosella Clyde, who I saw in the chat is from the Chatham Borough Environmental Commission, and I served on that one years ago. So just shout out to Chatham Borough. But the question is, water rise is not just important in coastal areas. How are these tools useful for more inland communities?
So currently on NJ Flood Mapper, the only inland flooding we have is the FEMA flood zone data. However, we are working on a project where we are developing inland flooding data, so for riverine flooding as well. And we are actually approaching closely the point where we're going to be able to make that data public, and that will be integrated into Flood Mapper as well as soon as it becomes available. So that will allow you to do something similar to the sea level rise or total water levels, where you can actually see, okay, what's 4 feet of flooding, riverine flooding inland, and how could that impact my inland community? So we are working on that.
Great, thank you. And so if there's any other questions for Lucas, we'll get to them at the end of the session. And Deanie, I believe it is now Gary's presentation, correct?
Yes, yes, it is.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we do, Gary.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And thank you, Deanie, and the entire Anjac team. Jen and Liz and Randy and Ed from the Board of Trustees for the wonderful opportunity to speak with you today. And I'm going to be talking about an initiative that we launched through Bayshore, but really under the umbrella of the New Jersey Climate Change Alliance, which Jean explained to you and outlined to you, and I hope you visit our website. And very much our work through the Climate Alliance is done through work groups. So our current focus is on a number of critical areas in terms of climate, transportation, public health, natural and working lands, long-term planning. And we put together last year, starting really in August of last year, an organics work group. And very much a collaborative effort between the Climate Alliance, Bayshore, the New Jersey Composting Council, Sustainable Jersey, and the Center for Ecotechnology, and the Association of Recyclers that all serve on our steering committee. So going back a ways, the Association of Recyclers, or ANJR, we actually put together the original draft of the disposal ban legislation that I'm very happy to report became effective last Wednesday. So we do have disposal ban legislation to try to drive organic material away from disposal, from landfilling and incineration, and toward use, meaning donation, or to composting. It took us actually 7 years to get that legislation through. It was quite a long fight, but we're very pleased that it was passed and signed into law. In 2017, we had another very interesting and important law passed that was sort of a vision law, which was the New Jersey Food Waste Reduction Act, which created for the state a goal of recycling 50% of food waste by 2030. And that law also charged the DEP with putting together the state's first food waste reduction plan. So again, with ANJR, we work very closely with DEP in the formation and the development of that plan. And what was really clear, and it's really quite fascinating, is there's a total disconnect between the food waste world and the food rescue world. So what we sought to do in this initiative, again, under the Climate Alliance umbrella, was to perform a statewide gap analysis of what are the barriers we need to break down to be more sustainable in organic material management. And just to hit the metric, what we're concerned about this from a climate standpoint, because US EPA estimates that 15% of methane emissions come from landfills. So the more material we could drive away from landfilling and incineration toward use and donation and toward composting, the better. So what we did, the first interesting challenge we had is, how do you sort of get your arms around this massive area that we can refer to as organics? And we came up with the 5 chapters of the book of organics, and they were food waste donation, food waste management in schools, community scale composting, and that really refers to education for advancing backyard composting to hopefully create an explosion of new community gardens, particularly in urban areas all across the state, and properly run and manage outdoor windrow composters, so smaller scale operations, as well as large scale operations, which would be aerobic, anaerobic, and co-digestion technology, and developing that larger organics infrastructure in the state. And the fifth area was sustainable animal manure management, which is not an area that has gotten a terrific amount of attention statewide in the past. So here's what we actually did, and I'm going to go through my slides quickly, and all the slides and PowerPoints will be made available afterward, and go back and look at more of the details. But quickly, what we did is we put together what we called a lightning stakeholder process to try to give it a catchy name. And we started on April 1st and we ended on June 3rd. And in those 2 months, we ran 6 stakeholder discussions, which were all Zoom discussions. We had 80 organizations, which we participated, which was outstanding. And it really was sort of across the board: food banks and pantries, academics, associations, private businesses, nonprofit organizations, and a lot of involvement, which was very important, from the NJDEP and from the Department of Agriculture. And really, in a way, what we tried to do through this initiative was draft the implementation plan for Chapter 5 of DEP's Global Warming Response Act 80/50 report, which is dedicated to waste in agriculture. At the end of the day, end of those 2 months, we came up with, as a community, 70 recommendations, and that's too many to try to communicate and to implement. So we developed, if you will, an initial dashboard of 17 opportunities for action. And we wrote the plan sort of as we went. So after 3 months, we had a draft plan done. We gave a month for our stakeholders to comment. So soup to nuts, in 4 months, we drafted a sustainable organic material management plan for the state. These are the 17 opportunities for action. I'm not going to go through them because it would take an entire session to do so. 6 of these are cross-cutting, meaning they address all 5 books of organics. For example, education. It's all about education. And then there's 2 or 3 more opportunities for each of those areas that I framed. We finalized the plan, as I said, in August, on August 19th. And so what we're doing, plans are great. Plans are very important, critically important to do the homework, to set the stage for implementation. But that's where the rubber hits the road. So this initiative was really focused from the very beginning on actually getting things done, bringing about effective change, and implementing. So right now, we're pretty much, I would call it, in the briefings phase. And so today is a wonderful opportunity to speak with Environmental Commission officials who are so critical in the role that they play. And what we're advocating for and trying to develop, as the last bullet here indicates, are practical and replicable models. So great examples are the work being done in Westfield and Ridgewood in organics management. So as an example, we're working with Westfield to try to embrace all 5 of the areas of our plan and to figure out an implementation strategy for the municipality. And we want to, after it's more advanced, develop that, be able to share it across the 565 towns in the state. We're thinking big, to be sure. So in terms of briefings, I'm not going to go through all of these once again, but I'll mention a few. Senior leadership at the DEP. We had an hour and 10-minute briefing with Commissioner LaTourette from DEP and his entire senior chain of command, senior chain of command at the Board of Public Utilities. The legislature, some of our work will result in legislative proposals. We had 2 terrific briefings with Senator Bob Smith and Assemblyman Jim Kennedy, who had the environment committees in the Senate and the Assembly, and they had their entire legislative staffs from the Office of Legislative Services participate. So they're aware of our plan and are very willing to work with us to try to advance legislation to advance the cause in organics management. Just a couple others I'll mention. All 21 recycling coordinators we had a chance to brief. Many of the municipal recycling coordinators who are so important on the ground. And we will have a briefing session in the not too distant future with First Lady Tammy Murphy and the governor's senior policy advisors. Because something very important happened in July in the food space that I'll mention quickly. We had a piece of legislation passed to create, for the first time ever in New Jersey, an Office of Food Insecurity Advocate. And one of the issues that we struggle with in donation of food is we don't have any form of central governance sort of driving recovery across the board, and this office will do that. So we're hoping that our work that we did through this work group from the Climate Alliance will help inform the initial work of that Office of Food Insecurity Advocate. This is sort of just a menu of other organizations that we plan to brief. You know, you got to get the word out. So we're really trying hard to do that. We actually did a press release last Wednesday, coincide with the effective date of that disposal ban legislation, which is referred to as the Food Waste Recycling Law in New Jersey. And we're going to continue to do as many briefings as we can. So far, as you know, in our work, often the limiting factor is funding. We have, through our member organizations, already obtained 5 significant grants to implement, to push the envelope. I'll just mention a couple again as examples. Through Sustainable Jersey, we got a $235,000 grant, which is also between College of New Jersey and Rutgers, to develop a toolkit for composting and organics management in schools. So one of the things we're doing is actually purchasing automated composting equipment. You might be familiar with rocket composters. That's one example. And we're going to have them installed in 3 schools. We did select the schools in a competitive process: the Delray Middle School in Burlington County, the George and Trombone School in Long Branch in Monmouth County, and the Halstead Middle School in Newton up in Sussex County. And they're going to run these automated composters, develop school gardens, cultivate and raise the produce that's fed in their cafeterias, and then compost the organic remains in those from lunch tables, and then put the compost back into the school garden. So you get it, sustainability. So that's just one example, and then develop a toolkit that again will make available to all the towns that participate in the Sustainable Jersey program. The second one I'll mention is a grant, $172,000 to Stockton University and Rutgers and the Center for Ecotechnology. And this is to develop, similar to what Lucas was talking about, these great tools that we have for climate preparedness, to sort of be able to visualize what future impacts will be and vulnerabilities. For the food, US EPA actually put together an amazing data set, which is called the Excess Opportunities Map. It's a GIS mapping for the entire country, which lists food banks, pantries, soup kitchens, compost facilities. But even though it was a Herculean effort, it needs a great deal of refinement. So we got a grant to refine that database to make it available. And then the goal is to link it with apps that are out there today. And I'll just give you an example. Downtown Newark, in the Ironbound section, we may have a restaurant that has 40 excess meals at the end of the night. This is an app that would allow live, real-time communication between that restaurant and food rescue organizations to come and get that food and be able to distribute it that evening or the next day. So you might be familiar with the Recycle Coach app that DEP actually funded for all the towns in the state. This is we're hoping to push for a similar type of a thing where we can make this available across the board and really advance food donation in the state. A final one I'll mention, working through Gene Herb again, the state policy lab at the Blaustein School. We have 3 graduate students that are doing the homework necessary to look at what other states have done that has been affected across our 17 opportunities for action. And that homework is critically important when you go to the legislature and you push for new initiatives. So my final slide is just on coordination with DEP. Regulatory reform is very important and very much necessary if we're going to sort of practice what we preach about being more sustainable with organic material management. So we're working really hand in glove with DEP to advance this cause. Education will be a big focus. Next week, we will be beginning the formation of an organics education committee to develop sector-based education material to distribute out to the community in line with the disposal ban legislation I mentioned. We hope to work with all 21 counties. And as you know, county planning in solid waste and recycling has been the norm and the driving force for 40 years in New Jersey. So we want to work with the counties to develop a non-regulatory, and I stress non-regulatory, round of county planning focused on organics. And what I mean by that is not a draconian edict from the state that you have to do X, Y, and Z by a certain period of time, but actually a discussion to talk about what we can do through county plans to advance organic material management. And the last thing I'll mention, another big focus we will have is on small scale exemptions. Unfortunately, the regulatory scheme currently at DEP for small scale systems is kind of too tight a box. So I'll give you just one example. Community gardens, technically to apply for a community garden approval to be able to accept material beyond the confines of the garden is a $10,000 application fee and a $17,253 annual compliance monitoring fee. Now, no neighborhood has anybody to do this stuff. So we really need to develop the criteria for safe and proper management, but to allow these things to happen. And it's the same thing for compost systems in schools. We could put these automated composters in the 3 schools I mentioned, but they can only, under current law, take food from that individual school. Why not develop an opportunity where the school can take food material from the other schools within that municipality? Right? That would make a heck of a lot of sense. But if you try to do that now, that's a commercial facility. So that's it, Edie. Thank you very much. I can see I'm at my time as I usually am, and really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
A lot of information. Thanks, Gary. All right. Thanks for stop sharing. And we are actually going to go ahead and head right over to you, Karolina. So when you're ready, please share your screen.
Sure. Okay. Can everyone hear me? That's great. Yeah.
Yes.
One second. Sorry. Okay.
I could see your slides.
Great. All right. And you can see them?
Yes. Perfect.
Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Deanie and Ed and everyone from Anjac for the invitation. Really honored to be here to be talking about Jersey City's recent accomplishments. I also want to give a shout out to the Jersey City Environmental Commission. I'm the secretary for them, so shout out to them. But anyway, so the Jersey City Climate and Energy Action Plan was created to provide a detailed and strategic framework for meeting city climate and related sustainability goals. And it was a great effort because it really involved the community, internal and external stakeholders in identifying and implementing strategies. It helped us get everyone on the same page. So whether it was other departments, regional or local agencies, so it brought, other people to the table, and it was great to hear, their perspective and their ideas on our actions and strategies. And our plan also ensured that strategies will live on in future administrations, which we all know in terms of climate change related policy, that's really important. So our CEAP, as we call it, our Climate and Energy Action Plan, aligns with the state efforts. So from our Energy Master Plan to our 80 by 50 report. In 2015, Jersey City adopted a resolution to reduce emissions by 80% by 2050. And 2017, Mayor Fulop joined the Climate Mayors after the US dropped out of the Paris Climate Agreement. And then in 2018, the city committed to the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. And finally, in 2019, we published our first ever community-wide greenhouse gas emissions inventory. So our total community-wide GHG emissions is 2,197,275 metric tons of CO2 equivalent. So with 67% of emissions coming from the stationary energy sector, followed by 30% by the transportation sector and 3% from the waste sector. The CEAP planning process started in the fall of 2019, and that started with our steering committee and our working groups, which I'll go into a bit more in the next few slides. And despite some interruptions because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we were still able to publish our final version of the CEAP in the spring of 2021. And then it was passed by council in right shortly after, and then over the summer, it was passed by our planning board. So our steering committee was made up of about 15 representatives from local, regional, and state agencies. They assisted us with the general steering of the CEAP process and assisted us with outreach and reviewed our documents throughout each of the phases of the CEAP planning process. So they were really instrumental in getting the CEAP together and publishing it. But I also want to give a shout out to our four working groups. And they were, we had 4 different working groups. We had about 15 members in each group. We had, so they were specific to sectors, but we also included an equity and outreach working group to complement our efforts. Also, we had an energy, transportation, and land use working group and our waste working group. So they reviewed national examples and the New Jersey Energy Master Plan. They established draft goals for each GHG emission sector and recommended specific action items. So they also were a huge part of our CEAP process, and we couldn't have done it without them either. So the goals of the CEAP were to reduce our, so we established our goal of reducing GHG emissions 80% below 2016 baseline by the year 2050. It's also to adapt to climate change and build community resilience here in Jersey City, and also ensure that solutions are implemented equitably. In total, there are 57 action items across all the sectors, so our energy, waste, and transportation and land use sectors, to help us meet those GHG reductions. We also implemented climate equity objectives into our CEAP, which we hope to continue working on as we move forward with the strategies and high impact actions identified in the plan. So our objective 1, we seek to improve energy security and affordable access to clean energy while minimizing displacement. Our second objective is to increase access to active transportation. So walking, biking, public transportation options that are affordable, low or zero emission. Objective 3 is to expand and improve access to parks and public green spaces. And objective 4, reduce the risks and impacts of air pollution, flooding, and extreme heat. So I'll be diving into our waste sector just to segue into our composting programs. But for our waste sector, we identified 15 actions in total. And out of those 15 actions, we identified 5 high priority actions with both our steering committee and working groups. So Our first one is to develop a citywide zero waste plan. Second, facilitate reuse. Third, increase recycling education. And 4 and 5, which I'll touch upon in the next few slides, is expand residential composting. And number 5, composting business food waste, which is more of a long-term goal, but I'll go into that a bit more in the next few slides. So our Jersey City residential composting programs are managed by the Division of Recycling. So I do want to give them a huge shout out to Director Sonia Dublin and composting manager Cash Johnson. They have done a great job with these programs. And so they are managed by the Division of Recycling in partnership with Community Compost Company, who picks up the composting at our drop-off sites and our mobile compost pilot, which I'll go into more detail. But so our programs here in Jersey City are the drop-off composting program, the backyard composting program, and the newest one is our mobile compost pilot, pickup collection by e-bike. And so as of October 2021, Jersey City residents have diverted 227,953 pounds of organics from our waste stream. So that doesn't include the bike collection pilot. So that just started in mid-September. So hopefully we'll have a good picture of those metrics at the conclusion of the pilot. So I'll start off with our drop-off composting program, which was launched in 2018. So that was the beginning of Jersey City's efforts, composting efforts. And as of October 2021, so this year, there are 11 drop-off locations within the city. Sheds are accessible daily. So in that picture, you can see one of the sheds at a local park, Kinko Park. It's a wooden shed, and then there are 2 floaters in there, and they are accessible daily, 24/7 as of now. And in total, residents have diverted about 210,000 pounds of organic waste stream. So this is a really big program in Jersey City, and we hope to continue to expand it. Next is the backyard composting program. So for those residents that do have a private backyard or have the space and do want to compost and then use that amendment in their gardens, or however they'd like to use it, the city does offer discounted compost and free workshops. I don't know about the status of them right now, but I know we were giving them out for a while, and then I know COVID happened, so I'm not quite sure where that stands right now, but we were giving out these 5-gallon backyard bins, as you can see in the picture. And there are a total approximate number of participants, about 681, and residents have diverted approximately 16,000 pounds of organics. So our mobile compost program, pilot program, so the e-bike program launched in mid-September 2021, so just recently. Pictured here is Ollie, who is our e-bike rider, and he goes around and collects food scraps from home. So the city promoted the sign up the registration form for a couple of weeks, and resulted in about 61 participating households. And then we went in there, we mapped out routes for Ollie because the program was open to residents, throughout the city. We took the list, we routed, his stops for each of the days that he's working. So he works about 3 days a week, and he makes about 20 stops, per day. So we tried to make a routes for him that made the most sense. And so he'll go around, he'll collect food scraps. Households are told to leave their composting bucket outside of their house on their designated day. And Ollie goes in there, picks it up, puts it into his buckets, and then he'll go and drop off the organics into one of our sheds, which is then collected by our partner, Community Compost Company. So we hope to have a little more information how this pilot goes, conclusion of it, which will be in, I think, the end of December. So probably, hopefully early next year, we'll have a better idea of how that goes. So next steps are to expand residential composting opportunities for food and yard waste, which we are doing with For example, our e-bike collection program, and more on a long-term scale is our expanded New Jersey food waste mandate that went into effect to encompass smaller institutions and businesses. So this is my contact information if anyone ever wants to contact me. And also I included the Director of Recycling, Sonia Dublin's contact information if you have any questions about the composting programs. Our website is also there, and our climate action page is also at the very bottom. So thank you very much, everyone.
That was great, Karolina. Thank you so much. I think Ed has some questions from the chat box.
Well,
The
my first
Q&A.
question for you, Deanie, was do we have time for questions? But it sounds like
Yeah.
we have time for at least a couple.
Absolutely.
So we have a couple mapping questions that are out there. So we'll start with the first one from the chat. Are there any maps out there that are showing changes to the percentage of a municipality's impervious cover that you can map to impact or show the impact and incidence of flooding over time?
Yes. So there are some data sets. I'm trying to remember the organization that's putting it together. So the Multi-Resolution Land Characteristics Consortium, the MRLC, they have what's called an NLCD land cover database. And so they break out land use as well as impervious cover and tree canopy. And they have that data going back quite a few years. So you can actually look at some change over the past, I believe, at least 10 years, if not longer. So there are some sources to that. We actually have that data integrated in our Force Adapt platform. So you can go there if you want to kind of just take a look at it and see what it looks like.
And let me just add to that, the way we choose to set priorities for what data that we put into our tools is based on hearing from people like you. So if you guys are in there and you're fiddling and you're like, oh, I wish they had this or that, please let us know.
Well, that is a great segue into our next question, Jean. Is there a map that drills down to municipal level about where public composting facilities are currently located?
I don't think so, Gary. I don't think so.
Yeah, not a mapping. The Division of Solid and Hazardous Waste at DEP has a website that does have the inventory of all the compost facilities. What I mentioned earlier, that US EPA excess opportunities map does a mapping and has some of that information. But again, we pursued getting that grant because it's not quite accurate, so we're going to improve on it. But I would say the best source, if you go online, US EPA excess opportunities map, you will find a link that does include compost facilities.
Great, well, thank you. I believe, Deanie, I think that covers all of our questions that would go to all of our panelists.
There's one quick one for Karolina. If she can answer that, that would be great.
Oh, I see that one. Yes. So Karolina, and the question is, what is the timeline to implement the other priorities highlighted in the Jersey City SEEP energy, transportation, and other waste sector priorities?
Sure, yeah. So I think the next steps, we're definitely working with our planning division to work on our transportation and land use related climate actions that were outlined in the SEEP. So we're working with them. We did receive a grant through the NJBPU for next steps of our SEEP. So we're really excited for that, and we'll be working with our planning division to focus on those action items. Other obvious next steps for in regard to like the waste sector, the doing a waste audit and our zero waste plan. That's something that will also work hopefully early next year with our Division of Recycling and our Department of Public Works, at least get that started.
Wonderful. Oh, clearly there's a lot of information all our experts have shared today, and I apologize that we don't have time for more questions, but feel free to reach out to them, and I'm sure they'll get back to you quickly. If folks can hang out with me, I just have a couple more closing slides to share before I let you get on your way. Okay, I'm going to just share my screen. All right. All right. So we are halfway through. We have more sessions for the rest of the day and the rest of the week. But first, I just wanted to share that we are doing a survey. If folks have already participated in the survey, which then you don't have to do it again. Your name is in, and we are counting your recommendations. But we do want to continue to serve you. So this takes honestly just a couple minutes to finish. And at the end of the week, the winner doesn't have to be present, but we'll do a drawing, and they will be getting a specially curated New Jersey gift box. So that's happening. And as far as the rest of today, at 4 o'clock, we have a wonderful session on electric vehicles. Then we're doing a program tonight on clean energy in New Jersey. So look for that. And then starting tomorrow, we have our featured speaker, Commissioner Sean LaTourette. And we're doing a fun event about social media, and then we're going to do some networking, so you'll have an opportunity to ask us questions. We're going to do some breakout rooms, so you're all the learnings that you've gotten over this past week, you can ask more questions, and we can have conversations about it. And a thank you celebration in the evening for Senator Bateman and Senator Weinberg. And we're going to wrap up this week and the 48th Environmental Congress with a celebration with a live presentation from Kofi and Sankofa drummers. So we're super excited to celebrate the end of this 48th Congress. But for now, we are wrapping up. Thank you, Ed. Thank you to all our speakers, and thank you to you for joining us. Jen, Liz, is there anything else?
I don't think so. Thank you, everybody. It's good to see you
Nope.
all.
Okay.
Great.
Thanks.
See you all later.
Bye.